Welcome back into One on One, New York's longest running sports call-in show. I'm Andrew Gullotta alongside Brian Rabacs, and we are joined by a very special guest and WFUV alum. He's the New York Yankees scoreboard and digital host and reporter, and also he's the co-host of Toeing the Slab with David Cohen on Jomboy Media. Justin Shackil, how you doing, Justin?
What's up, guys? Thanks for having me.
No, thank you for coming on. Definitely really appreciate it. And in our last segment, we were talking all about the MLB lockout. And obviously, there's a ton of stuff to get into there. But I wanted to ask you how it really, what's its implications for the Yankees? Because obviously, they didn't do a lot pre-lockout. Some people think, they have more to do post-lockout. But what do you think the implication on the lockout specifically has implications for the Yankees?
I probably heard about 90% of the question before it dropped, so I was I
Okay.
was I was rearing to go. I think you were asking,
Yeah,
how this really affects the Yankees, right?
exactly. Yes.
So I think they're one of 30 teams. They are kind of all affected the same way. I think there are going to be unintended consequences from the lockout. Definitely, aside from the urgency that the league is trying to create. I don't think you're going to have it here on December 4th. I
Yeah.
think by February 4th you could have it, but I think the unintended consequences of something like this are teams shifting or pivoting aggressively in one direction coming out of the lockout immediately. And what I mean by that is there's going to be a certain type of player that is kind of left in the dust here. And talking about like maybe middle tier free agents where it could still be enticing for clubs to go the cheaper, younger route with guys that they are looking at as more controllable than those, the middle tier free agents that aren't necessarily the big star names that we've seen come off the board so far. People like, the Seagers, the Semyons, and, the Verlanders, the Scherzers. I think there's that middle tier that could, be falling into that category of the unknown. And yeah, the Yankees were pretty quiet leading up to the lockout, but so were a bunch of other playoff teams from last season. Only two teams that really went crazy during this frenzy from the last week or so. It's the Blue Jays and off the top of my head, the Marlins. Yeah, the Blue Jays and the Marlins. They made the playoffs in the expanded playoff format in 2020, but other than that, the Rangers, the Mets, they none of these teams have been consistent postseason contenders. So yeah, you have the Yankees, the Dodgers, the Red Sox. They're kind of staying quiet here, but I think the rules apply to them just as much as they do to some of these other teams that you saw were very active. So I don't think there's going to be a big drastic change. They're going to have to hurry coming out of the lockout for sure, but every team is going to.
Now, Justin, as we alluded to prior to the lockout, there was a massive free agent frenzy. Players were signing left and right. Corey Seager got off the board, Marcus Semien, Robbie Ray. A lot of guys that the Yankees were rumored to have their eyes on, and they obviously went to different teams, and the Yankees didn't do a whole lot. Do you think there's a player that went off the board that the Yankees, you feel, could have made a bigger push for?
Well, it all depends on what they're looking for, what they're interested in, right? And
Yeah.
only behind those doors do they know exactly what they want. So, what there's a lot on Twitter of Yankee fans clamoring for this guy and that guy in free agency and watching maybe a Max Scherzer going to the Mets or a Justin Verlander going back to the Astros. So that deal isn't officially complete now.
Yeah.
They didn't get the deal finalized before the lockout was incorporated here, so he's kind of up in the air. But there are probably factors that we haven't heard about yet. I know a guy like Robbie Ray completely did not want to hear from a team in New York, so you can't fault the Yankees for not grabbing Robbie Ray. He went to Seattle, kind of went as far away from New York as you possibly could. Max Scherzer, from everything that we've heard, and I'm not trying to, put anything behind this here, but it seems like he's a National League guy at this point in his career, right? So I think he definitely took the biggest bag, and he probably should because of his role on the Players Association Executive Subcommittee. But the Mets were going someplace where no other team was going.
Mhm.
Other players like Seager, well, then you look at and you ask yourself, man, do we really want to commit 10 more years to someone? So in my opinion, if I was building a team, I would stay away from the 10-year contracts. I would like to try and eliminate as many 3 true outcome guys on my roster as possible. I don't think you could do that in one full swoop. So the players that the Yankees have largely been connected to, specifically at shortstop, are still out there.
Yeah.
Carlos Correa, Trevor Story. So if they want to make the big splash with the big name at shortstop versus going for a stopgap, and those options are still out there as well, it's tough for me to get really up in arms about the inactivity with the Yankees. Are they off to a good start aesthetically? No. But we're a long way away from the 2022 season starting. I think we're closer to the end of the season than we are to the start of next season. So there's still a long way to go. If they don't make a move, if you're kind of looking at this roster the same way it is now, say on February 10th or whenever spring training gets rolling, then I think you have a right to make some noise there. But as of right now, I can't get too worked up behind what the Yankees haven't done because the options are still out there.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. You look at all the options, definitely there. And, whether they make the big splash or maybe go for a few more like role player types, what positions do you feel like you see them making the biggest moves? Obviously, shortstop's been an area that they've been rumored to be interested in, but what other positions kind of do you feel like they need to kind of solidify and round out their roster?
I definitely subscribe to the notion, and this is something that I kind of learned early on in my baseball career. You are only as strong of a team as you are up the middle. So catcher, second base, shortstop, center field. Seems like they're going to stick with Gary Sanchez for his last year of team control. I think there were some options out there that they checked in on and they pivoted away from. And look, there's still plenty of offseason left. You don't, nothing's etched in stone at the catching position, but I think going up the middle with those positions, I think that is high on their to-do list. I think getting a first baseman is up there as well. I believe, despite the strides that the pitching staff as a whole made in 2021, I think you still need that 1A type pitcher behind Garrett Cole. If you kind of want to leave no doubt with this roster and with this championship core and its window coming to a close, let's not make any mistake about it. The window is closing more than it is opening as of right now. They're only a couple of moves away from maybe that narrative changing and that window opening again. But I really think you need another solid starting pitcher behind Garrett Cole for reasons, number one, again, like I said, leave no doubt. Two, maximize these early seasons on Garrett Cole's contract, because this is the time now to win when Garrett Cole is in years, 2, 3, 4, the front end of that deal. And I also believe another reliever can't hurt. But bottom line is try and fix up the middle, try and become more athletic by addressing the positions up the middle, first base, and another starter behind Garrett Cole.
Yeah, there's certainly a few areas that the Yankees have the ability to address, but focusing specifically on shortstops, the Yankees have been linked to Carlos Correa and Trevor Story, who are still available. But we've also heard that they may not be in exactly on the top-tier shortstop. So do you think it's absolutely necessary for the Yankees to get a shortstop, or do you think it's fine to settle for less, given that you have guys like Anthony Volpe in your minor league system?
I personally think that whatever comes from the Volpes and the Perazzas of the world is icing on the cake. I think the big name shortstops who are proven at the major league level are out there. I think you should be aggressive in trying to lock them up. And then you figure out what to do with the prospects down the road when they're here and they've shown that they belong. I think those are good problems to have. I think those are champagne problems. The New York Yankees are in the business of champagne problems. That being said, I think you can absolutely go in a different direction at shortstop if you are going harder at addressing other positions. So if you maybe look at the names that were floating around that are not Story, that are not Correa, you have Isaiah Kiner-Falefa being there. You have Andrelton Simmons. Seems like, he needs to be a Yankee at some point just for those rumors to, come to fruition after years and years and years. If you go that route, well, then I could definitely see them going much harder at addressing first base, whether it be with a Freddie Freeman or a trade for a Matt Olson or doing some other move that no one's really having on their radar at the moment. Kind of the Yankees' best moves happen when nobody sees it, and they come about, and the team's announcing the move before though there are those rumors and rumblings. So I think they do their best work when they're kind of lurking in the shadows, kind of crouched down beneath the weeds and all that stuff, and that's when the Yankees are at their best in the offseason. That could definitely happen, and I think you're going to get one way or another between shortstop and first base. You're either going to have a strong shortstop or a possible, picture that we are pretty familiar with at first base, whether it be Luke Voigt, DJ LeMahieu playing there, or vice versa, a lesser known commodity at shortstop with a more strong replacement type player at first base. And again, the names at the top of that list, the Freemans, the Olsons, type of player like that.
And one more question, Justin, before we let you go. Your podcast, Toeing the Slab with David Cone. What's it been like to work with, a Yankee great, really a pitching great, David Cone? What's it been like to work with him and kind of have that podcast? Just was curious about that.
Yeah, so I'm in my mid 30s. Yeah. The teams of the 90s are my teams. The players are my guys, right? Joe Torre is my manager, so to speak. And I grew up watching those teams with my grandmother, and David Cone was right there. And if she was still alive, she would technically be 100 years old next year. I keep thinking, my old Italian grandmother, right? If she was still alive, what she would be. It's things that you can't say on the radio. That's what she would be saying. The fact that her grandson's hosting a podcast with a guy like David Cone. So it's awesome, learning a lot. I've been blessed to kind of have a relationship with David before we started this project. It's been great. Getting to work with him more. James Smythe as well, and the whole entire crew at Jomboy has been a bunch of fun. And we've had some awesome guests on so far in the pitching world. We're going to continue doing that as well. So it's been a real. We're only about a month and a half, 2 months in, but it has been an awesome experience for sure.
Definitely sounds good. Definitely check out Toeing the Slab with Justin Shackil, David Cohen here on Jomboy Media. Shackil's also the Yankees scoreboard and digital host and reporter. Thank you for joining us, Justin.
Thanks, guys, for having me. I appreciate it. Happy holidays.
Yeah, you too. We'll be right back on One, New York's longest running sports call-in show.